Hi everyone. Today we are working with our watercolor paints, and many of you may have never worked with watercolors before. So I want to go over how to set that up and how to get started with watercolor paints. So if you notice here, I've got my supplies ready, and really all I need is my set of watercolors, a stack of paper towels, a water cup, and a brush, right? And then I'm going to show you my sketchbook, and I went ahead and ripped out a page. So just rip out a page. That way you don't get any of your paint or your excess water onto your other parts of your sketchbook. So we want to try to save all the other paper in our sketchbook. And when we're working with watercolor, it gets a little bit messy and it takes a while to dry. So I'd hate for you to ruin some of your other pages in your sketchbook. So we've got that torn out. I've got my paper towels here. When I open up my watercolor set, I've got the tray here and I've got the watercolor pads in here. If I wanted to rinse out this tray, so this is what I had used last time, is still in there. If I wanted to rinse that out, I can take a paper towel, I can dip it in my water, and I can clean out each tray in that way. Or I could just pop the color part out and rinse out this entire tray, put the color back in, and then I'm ready to use my tray to mix my colors. I can do that. So what I like to do is a couple of different things here. I wanted to get you set up for experimenting with your watercolors today. So if there's any colors left in the tray, if you have an old set, you can just use water and liven those back up. Okay, add water. The watercolors need the water to be able to be used, okay? More water is going to make your colors lighter. Less water is going to make them darker. But if you don't have enough water, then they won't spread. So just keep that in mind. And really, that's just a feeling thing. It's just something that you need to kind of learn as you go. And that's why we're doing this full page of just experimenting. We're playing with our watercolor and learning how they work. So I can put one little section of green down. Notice how it's really light, and I'm going to let that layer dry, and I'll show you how to make that darker. So while we're working, we'll let that dry. Okay. If you would want to paint your entire abstract portrait or painting with a background color and then do expressive marks on top of it, then you would need to paint the whole background, let it completely dry, and then you could come back on top of it with either more watercolor or your marker or your colored pencil. You can use any of that on top of dry watercolor. And I encourage you to experiment with different media together. So maybe watercolor with pen on top or watercolor with colored pencil on top. After it dries, you can put any of those on top of there. So how to get the paint then mixed in the tray. So I add water, just water to the tray. I already had a little bit of blue in here, so I'll go with blue. And then I touch my wet brush to the blue pad of color, and then I'm going to come in here and mix it with the water, and that's going to be nice and bright. I can start making some expressive marks in that way, any kind of way. Okay, but I did want to show you guys what happens. I'm going to rinse out my brush by tapping it gently on the bottom of my water. If I would just kind of drop water, paint a little bit with plain water onto my page, and then I drop color into it, you notice it starts moving and marbling around. So the paint here, I can add green. I'll add green in here with it. It's going to start doing a marble effect as it dries. Let's zoom in on that. You can see it's got a little bit of a glare. See the paint moving because it's really wet right now. So I can move my paper and make the paint marble together. I can also blow on it, or I can use a straw. So I'll try to get a really nice spot of color here and then see if I can get it to move. All right, it did a little bit. It did a very little bit of a splatter. If you have a straw, it works a lot better. But you can splatter like this and throw dots on your page. You can experiment in any sort of way like that. Let's come back out so you can see some of the other colors. All right, my green up here is still drying. It's really close. So I'm going to come down to the bottom part of my paper. I've rinsed out my brush. And this extra part of my color, I'm going to add some red. And maybe I just do a swirl. And see how I didn't have as much paint on there, so it left a little bit of drag. I'm going to mix my red with my blue and make purple. So any of the color mixing that you've already learned, anything about color mixing, applies to these colors. You can use the colors straight from the container, or you can mix them together in the tray. Okay, so I can layer different colors on top, let them dry together. Any number of things that I can do as my mark making. Okay, so maybe my feeling is angry and I can make marks aggressively. Or maybe my feeling is more happy and I can make these swirls. Or I could make any number of swirls. All of these, it may seem silly, but they feel different when you look at them. When you look at this set of marks, it feels different than the swirls, and it feels different than these swooshes and waves. So all of these are not representing any particular thing. They're non-representational. They're just expressive marks. We're just making expressive marks. So to show you again up here, with my green, now that I've let it dry a little bit, if I wanted to make that brighter green, I can just come in then on top of it and paint another layer and see how much brighter it is after I let it dry. I also didn't use as much water this time in my color. So that's how you layer the colors to get them brighter. Watercolors don't have to be super light, but they are whenever you add a lot of water to them. Okay, so today we're making a full page of playing with watercolor so we can get a feel of how the watercolor works. Once you choose the different expressive marks that you like, you then add them to your expressive mark making page that you're turning in today. So you'll have to make marks with all of the art supplies that you have at home. Watercolor is just one of the things that you're going to use to make your marks. But again, I wanted you to play with the watercolor first, practice first, get a good feel for it before you jump in and decide on what couple of marks that you want to turn in. Okay, so you'll get a little bit of practice in today, experiment as much as you want, have fun with it today, maybe do some painting outside, come up with some different expressive marks, think about what you want to do for your project, and we'll work on the next step then tomorrow, putting the marks together with your representational item. Have fun today, guys.